Before we start this next thing, which is preaching or teaching, I think it could even apply to reading the Bible. Something new said about reps, which I think is really important. Some of you guys watch a Sports Center or any kind of Sports Center type program. A lot of times they have the top 10 plays of the week, right? Kind of like a highlight reel. And it's football season. It's a fingertip catch in the end zone. It's the center fielder going back, jumping up, and stealing a home run. It's a monster slam dunk in the NCAA playoffs or in golf. It's that chip shot that arches high, hits on the green, and then back spins to about 2 inches away from the cup. There are things that never make the highlight reel. Stretching, laps, someone shooting dozens of free throws in an empty gym. Other things that don't make the highlight reel, second down, solid run up the middle for 5 yards. First down, so that's 2nd and 5. I'll take 2nd and 5 any day. A single to center, a routine double play. Those things don't make the highlight reel. And yet, so much of our life and ministry is running the laps, shooting the free throws in the empty gym, single to center field, making free throws. Never makes a highlight reel. Sinks 2 free throws in the first quarter, And so what I've kind of a mantra that I've come to say is, don't try to do the extraordinary, do the ordinary, and trust God for the extraordinary. That my job is just to show up, bat, practice my free throws, and trust God for the highlight reel. And some days, God is pleased to do astounding things in baptism services, and the Spirit of God is present in a church service in just an overpowering and astounding way. My job is just keep showing up in the gym and shooting the free throws. Something else new said about tribal chiefs, and I didn't have the wisdom to mention this earlier, is that when you, by a tribal chief I mean someone that really holds some power and history in your church, there are times, Newt, when I am approaching a board meeting and I know a particular board member that a lot of people look to see what they're thinking might not be on the same page that I'm in. Well, whatever it happens to be. Launching a new campus, adding an addition, whatever. And when I'm wiser, rather than getting to the board meeting and trying to do tea parties with that person as other people watch, going out to lunch with him or coffee earlier, a couple weeks in advance, and just saying, hey, I just want to let you know what I'm thinking here. I want to get your feedback now. I just want to get into a board meeting, and if we happen to be on different pages, then it gets weird. And so when I have been wise on certain occasions, I've attempted to win an audience or the support of one person in private rather than trying to rally that person with everybody else watching. I can think of times when that has been to my benefit to have done so, and even to have delayed the issue with the board if there was one significant standout. And if I haven't persuaded him, it was going to be really difficult to persuade the group with the history and weight that person brought with him. So what I get to talk about next, and this is just a delight for me, I get to talk about the art of preaching, and preaching that reaches the heart. And so you have some notes in front of you that we printed out. Apologies for not adding notes with what you had earlier. And we don't want to talk about this at all. Okay, Aaron, could I have your help here or someone? There we go. Oh, it's a whole other series, so thank you so much. If we go back to our notes earlier and talk about what we're not going to get well at and get good at, this is me, technology. I have decided to do less better, and this is not part of it. So just the title I give this is called transformational preaching or transformational teaching. If you do not preach and you teach, even if it's a group of 6th grade girls, this could be helpful to you, or a junior high youth group, middle school youth group. I think everything I talk about could also be helpful in reading the Bible. So hopefully you can get something out of it, whether or not you have weekly teaching or preaching responsibilities. But thank you so much. When I talk about transformational teaching, I think that's the goal. And there is a radical difference, I believe, between teaching for information and teaching for transformation. There's a radical difference in your preparation, in your approach, and in delivery if you are teaching to take information from the Bible and get that into people's minds versus if you see the Scriptures as the tool that our gracious God is pleased to use on many occasions to remold and to reshape our lives. And so I would say I'm teaching, but I'm not simply teaching the Bible, and I'm not simply teaching the Bible to people. I'm teaching the Bible to people in the hopes that God will use this moment between us to bring encouragement, to bring conviction, and to transform us into the people we were created to be. And so I believe that the purpose of preaching at its highest form is transformation, not simply information. My kind of the bedrock foundation under that is I believe that the living God is often pleased to speak by His Spirit through His living Word, through a gifted communicator in a way that molds and shapes husbands and wives and kids and seniors within the congregation. And so I've got this deal there where it says them and us. Do you see that there? I think it's on the second page. And there's a deal there that says the two loves. And this is just so basic, it's almost embarrassing to even talk about. But them, by them I mean the people inhabiting the pages of our Bible. By them I mean King David, I mean Bathsheba, I mean Moses, I mean Aaron, I mean Pharaoh, I mean Jesus and the disciples, I mean the Apostle Paul, I mean Timothy. Them are the people that are fill the story of our Bible. By us, I mean the people that you're staring at as you open the Scriptures and are able to teach the Scriptures. And for me, a good sermon builds a bridge back to the world of the Bible and asks the question, what was going on there? Just what's going on here? Basic, and Aaron, if there are a couple more handouts, we've got a couple guests, want to make sure they've got a handout for this, if you can scare a couple up. There might be one in front of my blue folder there. And so it builds a bridge back to the land of the Bible and saying, okay, what in the world's going on there? What was going on in their situation? What's going on in their lives? What were their needs? But not to leave the congregation there, but to then build a bridge back to our world, in essence, to ask the question, what does that have to do? What does that have to do with us? And so I believe that for this to work well, a communicator of the Scriptures ought to have two loves. Enough love for the storyline of the Bible and for research. Enough love to spend the hours sitting, reading and rereading the story and pillaging ideas from commentaries. Enough love for that world to be able to do the homework. And yet enough love for the people sitting in front of us that we don't simply describe the world of the Bible without figuring out how that encouragement can be brought into our lives today. And so when I say two loves, a love, this is not that different than middle school math. If you have a middle school math teacher that is really successful, I bet they have a love for math. Anything else a middle school math teacher probably ought to have a love for? Maybe middle schoolers. All right, because if the person has passion for math and they don't care for middle schoolers are going to probably figure this out. By the way, I was reflecting on my own middle school and high school. I don't remember learning from teachers I didn't like. Furthermore, I never learned from teachers I thought didn't like me. If I held this inner suspicion, I don't think you like me, because they said something shameful, they rolled their eyes, verbal or nonverbal. One of the things that's happening between a teacher and the people listening is not simply informational, it's sociological. Do I think you like me? And do I like you? And so I think middle school math, where the magic happens, is if the person has a passion about math, but they also love middle schoolers. It would be even more so for middle school music. If you have a love for music, that's great, but you're not going to hear any music as these people squeak away on their French horns and clarinets as sixth graders or as seventh graders. So it's good to have a love for music, but you better have a love for middle schoolers. So I have a feeling, just to be redundant, I think there are people who have a love for people and do not love the homework side of studying and do not go deep into the scriptures. And I think it gets short-circuited a little bit, where the illustrations are good, it's relevant, but it doesn't explain the storyline of the Bible. And I think that there are people that are fantastic at studying the grammar of a passage of scripture, grammatical, syntactical analysis, cultural analysis, but really don't realize that they're looking at people who their spouse told them last week, I don't love you, and I don't think I ever did. Mom, I think I'm pregnant, and it's your 16-year-old. We've reorganized our business, and we've eliminated your position. What people carry in with them, the fears, the anxieties, trying to put mom into a nursing home when she's lived in the same house for the last 60 years. And so I think that it's a love for the storyline of the Bible, but something that brings it back, and you have deep affection for the people that you're staring at. And so I believe that the secret sauce, or the magic, happens often when there's enough love for the storyline of the Bible and research that you're able to get your butt into a chair for lengthy periods of time to do the study, and then it doesn't stay there. There are people that know more about Laodicea than they do about their brother-in-law's Allstate agency. And so somehow to come back to us. So the outline that I have here, which I kind of like, I have I've reduced this kind of, for our purposes today, 3 mistakes we make when teaching the Bible. So I'm just going to go through mistake number 1, mistake number 2, and mistake number 3. Are there probably more? I guarantee there are more. But for us today, just 3 mistakes we make when teaching the Bible. And I would say number 1 is we kill the characters. We kill the characters. Philippians chapter 4. A bunch of people have a life verse, kind of like that verse that represents your life that falls out of Philippians chapter 4. Philippians chapter 4, verse 11. I have learned to be, what? I've learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. Philippians chapter 4, 13. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Or I can do all this through Christ who strengthens me. Philippians 4:19. My God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. I want to suggest to you that it's possible to preach Philippians chapter 4 and those verses as if there is no Paul and as there are no Philippians and there is no friendship between the two. You can preach Philippians chapter 4 and kill the characters. Acts chapter 16, Paul goes to Philippi. He and Silas get beaten up there. They spend the night in stocks, and they're singing hymns at midnight. In Philippians chapter 4, where Paul says, rejoice in the Lord always, I will say it again, rejoice. He did that. And they saw it. Philippians is a prison epistle. When Paul says, do not be anxious about anything, he will be incarcerated for like 4 years. 2 years in Caesarea, where is it like Felix or Festus? Which one? That's waiting for a bribe? And he's like in this bureaucratic, case won't come up. Finally, I appeal to Caesar. He sails to Rome, and he's in Rome like for another 2 years. The words, I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances, were written by an inmate. Does that matter? I think that matters. I think that's huge cred in the story. Furthermore, and I have something here. Drama. My understanding of Roman incarceration is that they would provide you enough to keep you alive. But if you wanted to have food that really gave you nutritional value, if you wanted to have clothing, you better have friends on the outside, or you may better have a source of wealth that takes care of you. While Paul is imprisoned, we believe in Rome, a representative from the church of Philippi shows up. Guy's name is Epaphroditus, and he brings Paul money. One of the reasons that the letters to the Philippians is written is as a thank you note, thanking them for the gracious funds that they sent him. And he'll say in chapter 4, I am amply supplied. I have received from Epaphroditus the gifts you sent. But he wants the Philippian church to know at the same time that you think, okay, now that you've got this money, now that you can buy clothes, now that you can buy some food with more protein, you must now have peace and joy. And Paul says, no, there's something you need to understand. I had peace and joy before the money got here. That's why he goes, I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. And then he goes, I can do all this through him who strengthens me. The I can do all this through him who strengthens me is in the context of living without. It's not in the context of winning a national basketball championship. It's in the context of going without luxuries that used to be normal. And so as Paul thanks them for the money, he couches this thank you note in the context of the contented life. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to be plenty. If Paul were writing us today, he might say, I know what it is to stay in a 5-star resort. I really do. And I know what it's like to stay in a seedy hotel where it looks like the sheets have not been changed for a long, long time. Paul might say, listen, I know what it's like to fly business class. I really do. And I know what it's like to spend 2 days on a Greyhound bus where you almost don't get to close your eyes. I know what it's like to enjoy an incredible steak at a great steakhouse, and I know what it's like to go 3 days on an empty stomach. I've done both, and God has given me the grace to do both. Now, what we're doing there is we're traveling back to Paul, who's incarcerated. We're back to the gift. We're back to the Philippians, and we're dragging it forward in being able to talk about this issue of contentment with our congregation. That deal at the end, my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. I think that this was money that they could not afford to give. I think they gave money that they couldn't afford to give. There's a hint in that great passage on generosity, 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, where Paul writes, he's motivating Christians in Corinth to give to a famine relief offering for people in Jerusalem or Judea. And he writes to them, he says, I want you to know about the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches. Out of their most severe trial, their overflowing joy and extreme poverty welled up into rich generosity. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able, and anyone know what he says? And beyond their ability, and more. I want you to know about grace that God has given the Macedonian churches. That's up north. That's Philippi and Thessalonica. And so there's a shot here that this money that they collected, that they sent to Paul, I don't think they gave that because they were wealthy. I think Paul's going, well, this is great. How are you going to eat? You know, and Paul can't pay them back. And so he says, I just trust that my God will now meet your needs. Here's the deal. I've discovered something about giving, something about generosity. When I give money away, it's not mine anymore. Thank you. When I give money away, it's not mine anymore. It's not mine for a home improvement. It's not mine to renovate the kitchen. It's not mine for a weekend getaway. It's not mine in case my transmission goes out. And it's not mine to put in my retirement fund. When I give money away, it's not mine anymore. And the question that can surface with believers is this. If I'm taking care of God's interests, then who's going to take care of me? A lot of times generosity gets locked up, not because people are greedy, but because they're scared. There's this fear of tomorrow. What if I don't have enough? Or more often, what if I'm not enough after I give this away? And Paul writes, I believe from the bottom of my heart that my gracious God will meet all of your needs. Makes no mistake about it, fear of tomorrow will paralyze generosity today. Fear of tomorrow will paralyze generosity today. And if there's something in the gracious heart of God, when we speak of God's grace, we are speaking about that aspect of his character that gives and gives and gives. What if there is something within the heart of God that goes, you take care of my interest and I will take care of you? That's what Paul is saying here. What I'm suggesting here is that it is possible to preach from Philippians chapter 4 and for people to get a lot out of it without mentioning Paul, without mentioning the Philippians, and without mentioning their relationship. But what I'm suggesting is that there is a storyline here that is so rich and is so vivid and brings the story to life that those words were written by an inmate. Why would you do that? So I think mistake number one to make is we kill the characters. We preach a passage of Scripture as if those verses just kind of float out there somewhere in the Bible and are not anchored in very real human relationships. One more example of this. 1 Timothy chapter 6. It's again the topic of contentment. But godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. It's possible to preach that passage of Scripture. Just 1 Timothy, this is how it goes. 1 Timothy chapter 6 says, as if there is no Paul and as if there is no Timothy, and if there is no location. Open a study Bible to the book of 1 Timothy, and there will be a suggestion as to where Timothy is pastoring when Paul is writing. Where? Ephesus was the fourth largest city in the Roman world. It was behind the city of Rome, Alexandria, Egypt, and Syrian Antioch. Then came Ephesus. Notice it's on the coast of the Aegean Sea. It anchored trade. It was the trade center along that coast of the Aegean Sea. In our terminology today, Ephesus would be very similar to a New York City or a Hong Kong. The trade routes overland run east-west through the Lycus River Valley, dump out at Ephesus. Ships come into Ephesus, and so goods are constantly coming and going both ways. Aaron, I'm going to need your help here with the mouse. I've got just a little video I took a while back of the marketplace in Ephesus. The agora, or the marketplace. You walk through the triple monumental archway to enter the market. This is an elevated view. This large square here is the marketplace. It's 100 yards by 100 yards. It's like 2 football fields side by side. Those columns around the outside held up a roof system so that you had a covered walkway around the perimeter. And then there were shops that lined the entire perimeter and an open-air courtyard in the middle where there would have been additional kiosks. Now, let me repeat that again. 2 football fields side by side. Welcome to shopping in Ephesus. I need to go back to the verse. Godliness with contentment is great gain. We brought nothing into this world. We can take nothing out of it. With food and clothing, we will be content with that. Timothy is pastoring there. Yeah, godliness with food and clothing, we'll be content with that. Yeah, they probably lived in some 3-goat town with a couple shacks. No, this is written to the pastor of the Ephesian church. You know what you could buy in the marketplace in Ephesus? I think you could buy anything in the world. I think you could buy spices from the Far East. I'm sure you could buy purple cloth from Thyatira. You could buy jewelry from Egypt, and you could probably buy the latest fashions from Rome, right there in the agora of Ephesus. And Paul writes, we brought nothing into this world and we can take nothing out of it. That wasn't original with Paul. That existed much earlier in our Bible. The story of Job. Job gets like wiped out in a single day. And one of his responses is, naked. I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. So this we came in with nothing, we leave with nothing, traces back to the days of Job. It seems that Paul is paraphrasing that, where he says, Timothy, listen, remember this when you see the cargo coming and going. Timothy, remember this as you look at your congregation and see some of the stuff they're dressed in. Timothy, remember this when you walk through the agora and try to figure out what you need and what you don't need. As you try to differentiate between a need and a luxury, Timothy, remember this, we brought nothing in, we take nothing out. We brought nothing in, we take nothing out. Little girl's born. These little plastic tubs they wheel into the room where mom is, and family members show up in the room and they gather around this little girl, baby girl, 7 pounds, 6 ounces, so small she fits like right there between your waist and your knee. They gather around this little plastic tub. She's got one outfit, and everybody gathers to say hello. She gets home, and it's her first Christmas, and because she's the only grandchild, there is this mountain of gifts for her first Christmas. All she wants to do is chew on the colorful wrapping paper, but she just gets this mountain of toys and clothes for Christmas, number one. Then a life of accumulation has already started and she didn't even have a say in it. And fast forward the tape. She's driving out of her used car. The trunk is full and the back seat is full and she's heading off to college. She's got a lamp. She's got her laptop computer. She's got a bunch of clothes. She's got a popcorn popper. This is the easiest move she will ever make. Back seat of her car and trunk. Fast forward the tape, 10 years. Her and her husband are moving out of their starter home. They cannot believe that they need a moving van that is that large. Dishes, mugs, clothes, furniture, back and forth from the garage, the charcoal grill, the gas grill, the portable grill. He likes to grill. Rakes, shovels, camping equipment, bicycles of different sizes. And as this constant parade goes back and forth, they stand there together by this moving van and they go, where did we get all this crap? And they raise their kids, and then the day becomes when they decide to downscale and move into retirement home. All the furniture that they can't pawn off on the kids becomes garage sale fodder as they attempt to reduce down to 2 bedrooms. Her husband passes. Kids move her into a retirement home. It's really a room. There's a bed, there's a bookshelf with her Bible and a few books. There's a dresser with some clothes. There's less stuff than her first move to a college dormitory. Then the day comes when she passes. A dress is selected, and her family stands around to say goodbye. It starts in a plastic tub with one outfit. It ends with a wooden box with one outfit. And Paul's question is this: how much stuff do we have to accumulate between these 2 boxes to be able to go, I'm enough now? I have enough and I am enough. How much stuff? Paul says, Timothy, get your brain straight around this as you walk through the marketplace, as you interact with your congregation, as you attempt to disciple and coach the wealthy people in your church. We bring nothing in, we take nothing out. If you've got shoes and you've got a sandwich, you're good. With food and clothing, we will be content with that. I again want to suggest that 1 Timothy chapter 6 can be preached to some level of effectiveness if those verses just float out there. We say 1 Timothy 6 says, when I understand where Timothy is pastoring, when I pull in the personalities, when I keep the characters alive, I think it adds life and dimension that just isn't there when I just simply grab at verses. Mistake number 1, we kill the characters. We preach the scripture as if the characters aren't even there. Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. There's a superscription. It says a psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The first time we open the Bible, we see David as a shepherd. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Remember that shepherd David was chased around the desert by Saul for about 10 years of his life. And he says, God shepherds me. Psalm 23 has brought comfort to believers for centuries. I think when we remember, when we keep the characters alive, that when you insert Saul and David into the story, I think it adds a dimension that's very helpful. Before we move to mistake number 2, I just want to say a word about this, that often in a series, let's say on Philippians, or on Ephesians, or on Galatians, often we preach an introductory sermon where we introduce the congregation to Paul and to the Philippians and to the Philippian jail. And I think we wrongly think that because that was mentioned in the introductory sermon, that 9 messages later when we're in Philippians chapter 4, people still remember that and are connecting the dots. I would suggest that in a series on Philippians, that the Philippians need to be invited to every message. That the Philippians and Paul, somehow that relationship needs to get into every message. And furthermore, that they are not to be lost within the message. Not only would I not mention them in Sermon 1 and forget about them for the rest of the series, I wouldn't mention them in the introduction and forget about them for the rest of the sermon. In that Philippians chapter 4 thing, where we go, okay, they gave this money to Paul, how in the world are they going to eat? The Philippians are back in the story. It's still Paul, Philippi, us. Paul, Philippi, us. So this is not just one bridge that during the entire sermon we bridge back and bridge forward. It's possible that multiple times in a message, what's Paul saying to Timothy and then coming back to us? What's Paul saying to Timothy and then coming back to us? What's Paul writing to the Philippians and then coming back to us? Therefore, do not worry about your clothes, what you will wear, about your food, what you'll eat or drink. Consider the birds of the air. Your Father cares about them, will he not much more care about you? Consider the lilies of the field, not even Solomon in all his, Matthew, was that chapter 6? Matthew chapter 6 says, no, Jesus is teaching. Where is he teaching? Sermon on the Mount, which means that they are not inside, but they are outside. They're on a hillside. When Jesus says, consider the birds of the air, could you see them? When Jesus says, consider the lilies of the field, could you see them? Again, even in the Sermon on the Mount, we can kill the characters. We can kill off Jesus and the people he's speaking to, and we can lose the setting, somehow remembering that they're outside as he's talking about birds and talking about flowers. Somehow, again, I think that invigorates it with a little bit of life. So, enough about that. When I preached that at Ada, I mentioned a guy by the name of Graham Hill, who did a TED Talk on editing your life. Graham Hill mentions that the average American house is 3 times larger, 3 times more space than we had 50 years ago. Now, he's not saying that houses are 3 times the size. He's saying that with smaller families, the amount of square footage per person is much less, because even a house that's the same size, it might be 2 kids now, it might have been 5 kids then, right? And so we have about 3 times the space. Graham Hill asked a question in his TED Talk, my goodness, with all of this space, we just must be absolutely rattling around in all of this empty space. And everybody in the audience laughs. And he mentions that the American storage unit industry is a $22 billion industry because we've got so much junk that doesn't fit into our houses. We now need storage units to put the stuff that won't fit into our house. And we're becoming professional shoppers, and we shop because we're lonely and bored. And so that's where I, in going back to the Agora of Ephesus and then coming back to us, that's what I need to talk about with our people. How much stuff do we need to say, I'm enough, okay, I'm enough now. Used Graham Hill's deal there. Second mistake is we fail to feel. And by the way, I think there's 3 remedies to these. Who is the obsessive compulsive that wanted all of the, okay. Yes, I know. For those other obsessive compulsives who happen to be in the room. So just in case I get to number 2 and number 3, and I don't give the antidote to that, you help me. The team teaching, man. So number 1 is just that we kill the characters. I think there's a question that we can keep in mind that helps resolve that, and it's just the question, what's going on here? When I open my Bible to 1 Timothy 6, when I open my Bible to Psalm 23, when I open my Bible to Matthew 6, when I open my Bible to Philippians 4, just ask the question, what's going on here? What's going on here? What's going on here? When I get technical about it, call it authorial intent or cultural contextual analysis, but it's basically, I find that a freeing question. What's going on here? Why is he writing this? Why is he writing this to them? What's going on here? Question number 2, how we feel, we fail to feel. And I think the antidote to that is just kind of like, what's it feel like? What's it feel like to be them? So what's it feel like to be them? A great Bible study methods class, whether in Bible college or seminary, there are different branches of analysis. Grammatical syntactical analysis, cultural contextual analysis. Basically, the science of hermeneutics is broken up into various fields. I suggest to you that one that we are not taught is one called emotional analysis, which is just the question, what's it feel like to be them? What's it feel like to be them? So, I'm not obsessive compulsive, but the people around me might be. From the handout that we received, can you read the first verses of the Zechariah story? Is that what you guys have in front of you next? Luke 1? Pow. Can you just read the first paragraph, not the second paragraph, but the first paragraph out loud? And what we're looking here is for emotional analysis. The question, what's it feel like to be there?
In the time of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly division of Abiah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron.
Okay, tell me about this couple. What can you tell me about it? Next verse.
Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly.
Okay, they're good people. Anything else?
But they were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old.
Does this trouble you? Do you think this troubled them?
No.
When you're doing everything you know to do. God, for reasons you do not understand, was withholding something that to you would most reflect His blessing. Now, by the time you get to that verse, it says they were childless because Elizabeth was unable to conceive, and they were, what, it gives a time indicator. They were very old. So however old they were beyond that age where people thought you were still eligible. Now, we read about that in a sentence, but infertility doesn't happen in a sentence. Infertility happens through a series of monthly disappointments. They probably get married when they're late teenagers. And they get this idea of how their life is going to unfold. You get married, you work, you have kids, they grow. And there's no conception and there's no pregnancy. There's no child. Do people in their village, do Elizabeth's women friends, do they start giving home remedies? Do they give consolation? Oh, don't worry. Miriam in the next village, she didn't have her first till she was 28. There's plenty of time. And 28 comes and goes. At what point do the village elders take Zechariah aside and give him spiritual counsel? Confess your sin. Who did you slander? Did you blaspheme God in your heart? We know that God blesses those who are obedient. Where did you sin? Confess your sin. And here's Zacharias living an upright, blameless, and holy life, and he's baffled as to why God would withhold children. What's it feel like to be them? You go, well, that's kind of conjecture. Not entirely. When Elizabeth gets pregnant with John the Baptist, she says, "The Lord has taken away my shame. The Lord has taken away my disgrace." Elizabeth, boil this down to one word. I'm filled with shame. A life of shame, and what the village has believed about us, it simply isn't true. She gets pregnant, the Lord has taken away our disgrace. I think mistake number 2 is we fail to feel. We just fail to ask that question. What's it like to be them? What's it like to be doing everything you know to do that's right and feel like God is withholding from you that which you most desperately long for? By the way, what are you feeling right now? Are any of you feeling... I don't expect any of you to come up with this word, but the answer, the word I would look for is tension. Tension is a feeling of unresolved conflict. Haddon Robinson, I heard him say once, when tension is resolved, your sermon's over. You might go on preaching for another 20 minutes, but your sermon's over. Tension is this feeling of unresolved conflict. And right now, as we're looking at them, holy, upright, and blameless, and yet they're childless, I think we're supposed to have this feeling of unresolved conflict. Unresolved conflict is guys at dinner with his wife in the restaurant part of a restaurant. There's the bar part and the restaurant part, having a nice dinner together, and then wife says, "I'm going to use the washroom before we go." So guy's standing there and he starts watching the basketball game in the bar, and his wife comes back through and says, "All right." She says, "Yeah, hang on a second, because the score is 88-90." And the team that is 88 They are about to inbound the ball, and there's 5 seconds left on the clock. And he says, hang on a sec, just hang on a second. She says, who's playing? He goes, yeah, I don't know, but hang on a second. Something's at stake here. Something's at stake here. Change the scenario. He's walking through. She says, oh, I'm sure you want to watch this. This is the whatever, the Bulls or the Lakers, whatever. He goes, yeah, no. I thought you liked the Bulls. Yeah, but it's 90-60. It's a blowout. I know how this is going to go. Walks right past it. Question, what happens in a baseball field or in a basketball arena when it is very clear that one team is not going to catch up and it's the last part of the game? What happens?
Dodgers opening day when they beat San Diego 14-2.
Okay.
The stands were empty in the closing innings.
Pow! People go to their cars. Ninth inning, I'm going to beat the crowd. I'm out of here. Fourth quarter, 5 minutes left. We're going to get out of here. When tension is resolved through a blowout, people pack and they leave. They might not physically leave my sanctuary, but mentally there are places to go. And now with a smartphone that you can hold in your lap, there's even more places you can go. My shopping list, my to-do list, my mind wanders into next week, but I'm gone. And so if every sermon kind of is sin bad, God good, pray more, it's like a blowout. And so what can you do to create? Here's your challenge. How can you take that story and create an 88-90 game so that something's at stake? I'm telling you, with Zachariah and Elizabeth, baby, something's at stake. And people citing for them and going, yeah, why does God do that? Something's at stake. And with the Philippians given this gift, and kind of like, yeah, but now how are they going to eat? Something's at stake. I think that a sermon and sermon points, I think it's the art of raising tension and resolving tension and recreating tension and resolving tension and recreating tension and resolving tension. I think with a great introduction, you've just bought about 6 minutes of attention span. I don't think a great introduction buys you 35 minutes. I think the way the story is told, the way the story is unfolded, the way I interact with it, that I need to feel appropriate anxiety, that anxiety over there's unresolved, I don't know how. It's like in a book where you have to turn the page and go, what happened next? What happened next? What happened next? The book that you can't. When you find yourself listening to a radio program and it creates a driveway moment because you pull into your driveway and you're still sitting in your car because you got to hear the last 4 minutes of the program. Something's unresolved. So, fail to feel. By the way, Eminem, can you read the last two verses that we didn't read of this story?
When Zachariah's division was on duty, he was serving as priest before God. He was chosen by a lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to go into the temple of the Lord and burn incense.
We have a geographic change, a geographic shift. We've just moved from the village that Zachariah and Elizabeth was. Where are we now? We're in Jerusalem. And it introduced Zachariah as being a priest with the order of Abijah. You didn't decide to become a priest like someone becomes a Catholic priest. Dad, I'm going to become a priest. You were born into the family. And you had another job. I mean, you were a potter or a perfume maker or a fig grower or something. But like 2 weeks a year, your group would be called on duty and you'd head to Jerusalem. I think it was like 24 divisions. And so your number would come up. You'd go to Jerusalem, serve out that week. And then I think for like the special festivals, like a Passover and Pentecost and whatnot, that all of you, like all hands on deck. And so more would go. But Zechariah's group comes up. The Abijah group goes to Jerusalem. And then he is selected. And what job does he score this day? To burn incense. Okay. This is Herod's renovated temple compound. Herod's temple, he didn't mess with the temple proper, but he expanded the acreage of the grounds, lavish courtyards, colonnades. The circle there is around the temple proper. And people would not go inside the temple to worship. The priests would go inside the temple. People would stay outside. And the furniture in the temple is like in the holy place, there's like, 3 different items of furniture? What do we have? What do we have? Inside the, not the Holy of Holies, but the holy place. Candelabra, bread, and incense, all right? So, the candles, pardon me, the candles, the table of bread, and the incense, You bring in coals, you bring in powdered incense, and you'd either put the coals down, put the incense on top of it, or put the incense down, put the coals on top of it. But the idea was that as the smoke went up in the air from the incense, that all the people praying outside, their prayers were like going up to God as the incense went up. And this is where Zechariah is praying. The incense, as I understand it, was right next to the curtain. On the other side of the curtain, the holy place of most holy places, is where there had been, I don't know if it was still there then, was this deal right here, which since the days of Indiana Jones has been in a warehouse somewhere in a box. But this is called the what? Right, the box of the promises. That's the box of the promises. Our box, covenant, I am your God, will you be my people? It was the place on earth that at least represented the physical presence of God and the promises, the covenant promises that he had made to you. The covenant at Sinai. Will you be my people? Yes, I will be your God. Almost like a marriage ceremony. Well, that's inside. Outside, anyone knows what that building is? Artist rendition in the upper right-hand corner? Anybody know what that is? What's that? No? Yes, Fortress Antonia, named after Mark Antony, as in Cleopatra, Mark Antony. That, my friends, is a Roman fort adjacent to the temple, because what better place to start a riot and to start a rebellion than when you have tens of thousands of Jewish people gathered together from different parts of the country or world in the temple courtyard. And so that enabled you to get hundreds of Roman soldiers into the courtyards immediately. That circle reminds you that you are chosen and special to God. That circle reminds you that you are a third-rank colony of a global superpower and that your country isn't even your country. What's it like to live in that space? Where you believe that God loves you, cares for you, that you're his chosen one, and yet there is this massive evidence in your life that you have been forgotten. I look at Fortress Antonia up there and I'm just reminded that sometimes disappointment has an address. Sometimes just a physical reminder that you feel forgotten. It's a guy that's in his car and he drives past the company that used to be his and now there's a for lease sign out in front. He prayed about this decision, he sought counsel for this decision, he attempted to ask wisely and it slipped through his fingers. Sometimes disappointment has an address. No, I'm not willing to seek counseling and I am out of here. Sometimes disappointment has an address. It's your apartment. Driving the kids to your apartment and then driving them back to your wife, soon to be ex-wife's house, who refuses to reconcile. Sometimes disappointment has an address. This is the colleague at work that comes to you one day and it's so promising. You envision this long run together and says, I just believe that God is calling me to start a church. And you bless him because you believe this is God's movement and he does 3 blocks away. And you go, good night. And he has the favor of a lot of people and his numbers rocket and yours shrink. Sometimes disappointment has an address. People coming to Jerusalem and offering prayers have a very real reminder of God's steady covenant faithfulness and a very real reminder, a suspicion that they have been forgotten. And here's Zechariah, this holy, God-fearing, law-abiding priest, about to offer prayers on behalf of a people who feel forgotten. It's interesting. I think that with the revelation that John the Baptist will be born to them, God is answering both prayers. I believe it's a prayer on behalf of the people that Messiah will come, and I believe it answers the unheard or seemingly unheard prayers of Zechariah and Elizabeth for all of the years where they asked for a child. I'm going to meet your desire for a child, and this child is going to be someone so special you can't believe it. It's a good reminder for us that sometimes our stories are not yet fully written. The last chapter has not come. God may invade in I don't know that Zechariah lived to see John the Baptist preach his first sermon or present Jesus to the people. He was really old when John the Baptist was born. He might have been gone. What if God sometimes chooses to answer our prayers and we won't even be here to see that answer? What if God is not limited to working with our generation, but will answer our prayers for people yet unborn and yet to come? It means that God's work is sometimes slow when we are in a hurry. But he is not. Again, circling them and us, them and us. There's one more passage there. I think it's Naomi. Naomi arrives back in Bethlehem. People see her. Don't call me Naomi, she said. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune on me. Any questions about how Naomi's feeling about this whole deal? I mean, emotional analysis, you don't have to, there's no supposition involved. It's just flat out there. A famine came and hit Bethlehem, which is ironic because Bethlehem word means house of bread. There was no bread in the house of bread. And she and her family, Elimelech, 2 sons, it's like family picture, 4 people, mom, dad, 2 boys. What country did they go to during the time of famine? Moab. They go to Moab, right? Head out to Moab. Boys get married. Family portrait changes. Family of portrait of 4 becomes a family of portrait of 6. Boys, Mahlon, Chilion, marry 2 women, Ruth and Orpah. And then the family picture of 6 becomes a family picture of 5. Elimelech dies. We're not told how he dies. Elimelech dies. Naomi still has 2 sons. Good for you, Naomi. You have 2 protectors. You have 2 sons. They have wives. There's possibility of Elimelech being remembered through the babies they will have. Then, Mahlon and Chilion die, and we're not told how. Was it a war? Was it a construction accident? Was it illness? Was it starvation? We're not told. And now the family picture of 5 has become a family picture of 3, and it's 3 widows. When you got 3 widows in a picture, it's game over. Naomi is the female Job. She gets wiped out. She gets cleaned out. She tells these girls, I got nothing for you. And she doesn't. Go back to your dads. Go back. You got brothers living. They can take care. I got nothing for you. Orpah does. Ruth hangs on to her and basically says, Mom, I'm not leaving. You know the famous, where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. Your people, the Israelites, will become my people. Your God, Yahweh will become my God. Naomi gets back into town. I think she's been gone for years. People look up and see a stranger, and then all of a sudden in her face, there's this moment of recognition. Some of the women go, Naomi? Naomi? She says, don't even call me Naomi. I have been emptied out by God. She gets theological about it. Job said, shall we receive evil, good from the Lord and not evil? Naomi goes, if we receive good and credit it to God, when we receive bad, shouldn't we credit that to God too? The Almighty has brought misfortune on me. The Lord has brought me back empty. I have been emptied out. We lose something in the passage if we read that story and don't become emotional archaeologists. That's the job there, emotional archaeology. Now, that deal about, tactically, that deal about the family picture, everybody's seen a family picture change. I mean, we can't keep I've had my 3 children that are now 31, 29, and 27 marry, and now 3 grandchildren added to the picture. It's hard for us to keep a current family picture because of additions. But my dad is 76 and not healthy. Our family picture may also change because of subtractions. And if there are divorces in the family among siblings or whatever, the family picture changes. And so taking the Naomi story and using the tactic or tool of showing that family picture of 4, family picture of 6, family picture of 5, family picture of 3, family picture of 2. For reasons I can't explain, somehow that does a number on us. in a way that she went away and her husband died and her sons died and now she's back without them. That's like homiletical malpractice, without realizing what's going on there. So mistake number 2, we fail to feel. And so the question that I ask is just a question, what's it like to be them? What's it like to be full and to be emptied out? Mistake number 3, again, I confess again, there would be 50 mistakes we can make in teaching the Scriptures in a transformational way. I've just highlighted 3 that I happen to like monologuing about, is we villainize the villains. And by villainize the villains, I mean, you don't have to read very far into the story of the Bible until you encounter people behaving badly. Whether it's Cain killing Abel, whether it's Laban ripping off and deceiving Jacob, whether it's Joseph's brothers selling him into slavery, whether it's the Israelites, and my goodness, we're just through Genesis, whether it's the Israelites in the desert. And there can be a tendency to place ourselves above the characters, looking down on them in a way like, can you believe what a jerk that guy is? I could never do anything like that. And I think a healthier thing to do when we see people behaving badly is, rather than placing ourselves above the characters, I would plead with you to embed yourself with the characters and to ask a very life-giving question: where do I do that? Or, where am I tempted? Where am I tempted to do that? But you're placing yourself among the characters or with the characters. Is Kings the first deal that you got there, Aaron?
Read it.
No, not yet. Oops. Help me, dude.
Probably,
I just want you to feel like you got a job, man. It's probably, oh, watch this. Yes! Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We're done. That's it. Oh, we're done. We're over. Era of Israel's history called the divided kingdom. Under 3 kings, Saul, David, and Solomon, that's the era that's known as a united kingdom. And then Solomon has a son by the name of Rehoboam, and then this rival Jeroboam kind of splits off the country. And after that time, you kind of got the king of the north and the king of the south type thing. Excuse me, going on. So Judah in the south, Israel in the north. And then this story takes place in the north. And there's a king by the name of Ahab. His wife's name is Jezebel, a wonderful woman once you get to know her. And Ahab has a palace, I think it's his summer palace, in Jezreel. And next door to his palace, there is a vineyard. And he wants that vineyard. He wants to take out the vines and put in vegetables. I mean, what a cool thing to have your vegetable garden right next door to your palace. And so in a noble act, he approaches the owner. Guy's name is Naboth, and he tells Naboth, hey, what's it worth to you? Look, either I'll pay you see, this is a wonderful prop, works for like 79 stories in the Bible. Judas, Joseph's brothers finding the gold. Ananias and Sapphira, did you give all the money away? He approaches Naboth and he goes, I have used this so many times. He says to Naboth, he says, just what's it worth? I'll pay for it. Or I'll buy you another vineyard. What do you think? And Naboth says, yeah, no, not at any price. This is not a real estate transaction. This is like a spiritual endowment. I mean, God forbid that I should sell you the inheritance of my fathers. My grandpa grew grapes here. And my dad grew grapes here. And I brought my sons here since they were toddlers. This isn't a real estate transaction. God forbid that I should sell you the inheritance of my fathers. And this is where Ahab goes, yeah, I respect that. Just thought I would check. I'll look for another field. No, that's not what happens. Newton, what's the reaction of Ahab? Down a little bit, if you've got the text, or someone who's got the text right in front of you. Down a little bit. It says he went home. What does it say? Someone out loud, big.
Vexed and sullen because of what Naboth the Jezreelite had said to him.
Okay, and the next verse says he.
For he had said, I will not give you the inheritance of my fathers.
Whine that, Newt. He said,
I will not give you the inheritance.
I will not give you the inheritance of my fathers.
And he lay down on his bed and turned away his face and would eat no food.
Okay, does that sound mature to you? He went home, sulking?
Vexed and sullen.
Vexed and sulking, lays down on his bed, turns to the wall, I will not sell you the inheritance of my fathers, and refuses to eat. Does that feel mature to you? What a baby. Okay, let me ask you a question. What do you do when you don't get what you want? Hint. You do something. What do you do when you don't get what you do? What do you do when you walk into a board meeting and you have got the best idea ever? And someone with a chip on their shoulder about something totally different blows it out of the water. What do you do in the car when you're on the way home? What do you do when you don't get what you want?
Other people get sullen and angry.
Other people would get sullen and angry. Other people would get obsessive compulsive. Because we do. The heart will go somewhere. James asks this question. James asks a question that I've asked in my marriage a lot of times. He says, "What causes fights and quarrels among you?" James asked that. What causes fights and quarrels among you? I say, I want to know, because I walk in. All I did was said this, and then she said this, and then I said this, and then she said this, and all of a sudden it blew up the evening. What did that? James says, do you want to know? I said, yeah, not really. He says, is it not because of the desires that war within you? He says, you want something. It's a desire. You want something really bad. You're not getting it, and someone's going to hurt. That's it. James says that's where it comes from. I want something. I'm not getting it, and someone's going to pay. And I might make someone pay through my volume. I might make someone pay through articulation in whittling them down verbally. I might make someone pay through my silence. I might just get very formal. You were in my friend group. I'll still greet you. I'll still shake your hand, but I'll let you know that we're no longer a thing. I want something. I'm not getting it, and someone's going to pay. All I'm saying is this. If you look down on Ahab and go, that despicable king, can you believe? Place yourself there. And the question number 3 is, where do I do that? Or where am I tempted to do that? Place yourself alongside Ahab, and you'll get a totally different message than if you look down on him condescendingly, as if you could never do something like that, and the people in your congregation shouldn't either. You realize what's going to happen here. Naboth and his sons, they're going to get killed for a vegetable garden. Jezebel has them framed in public and killed, not only him, but no descendants. Naboth is going to get killed for a vegetable garden. We villainize the villains. Crazy end of that story. Ahab goes into the garden, and to inspect it. It's kind of like, okay, the zucchini are going to go there. The onions are going to go there. The garlic's going to go there. And he looks up, and there's a guy that's joined him in the garden. Elijah shows up in the garden, and Elijah says, you killed a guy to get a vegetable garden? Let me tell you what's going to happen to you. And Elijah the prophet starts throwing it down on Ahab, what's going to happen to him. Craziest thing in the world happens. Ahab went home, dresses in sackcloth, and he repents. He walks around humbly. God says, okay, it's going to happen to his family, but he'll be dead. He at least won't have to see it. That's the mercy that Ahab gets. You won't have to see this happen to your kids. And she, I don't want the dude to get mercy. And God gives mercy to the wrong people. And Ahab humbles himself, and God is merciful. And again now, build the bridge back. I don't care where you've been. I don't care what you've done. Humble yourself, man. Today, if you hear his voice, don't harden your heart. Give God the apology. Apologize to other people. Could be that the mercy of God awaits you. What if he wants to meet you in this mess? You know, and so completing the loop, bridge out and bridge back. Villainize the villains. There's one last text you have there. I think it's a Pharisee and the tax collector. We're talking about villains. The Pharisee has a role of villainy in our Bible. Can you read the parable?
Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector.
What a jerk. What a pompous, self-righteous jerk.
I fast twice a week and give a tenth of all I get.
All right. Now, what's the question we need to ask? Say it again. Go for it. You're close. Just
Where am I
bingo.
or alongside this guy?
Bingo. Where do I do that? Where do I do that? Say, well, I've never gone to a temple to pray. God, thank you that I'm not like other sinners. I'm telling you, there are times you think, thank God I'm not like him. He's 32 years old.
Still lives in mom's basement and plays video games in the late hours of the night. Thank God I'm not like him. It doesn't matter how. I bet they both have six-figure incomes. He's a dentist. She's a realtor. And they're constantly complaining about how there's not enough money. Thank God I'm not like that. That woman, she will sleep with any drunken guy that smiles at her. Thank God I'm not like her. Though we've never stood in the temple and prayed that out loud, thank God I'm not like him. Thank God I'm not like her. Thank God I don't do that. Now here's the tax collector. It says he won't even look up. It says he stood at a distance, probably a distance from the temple proper, because he's in the temple compound. And it just says he's like, God have mercy on me, a sinner. Yeah. I think there's a tendency to look at the Pharisees and for us to pray a different prayer. God, I thank you that I am not a Pharisee. But the opposite of the Pharisee is a guy that just acknowledges his sins. And God have mercy, God have mercy, God have mercy. God have mercy on me, a sinner. Something fundamentally happens in the story that is different if you place yourself alongside the Pharisee rather than you place yourself above the Pharisee. So I think mistake number 3 is we villainize the villains. I think a question that we can ask is, where do I do that? Where is that me? There should be in every text a moment where are we being recorded? We just go, crap. Oh, crap. I do that, or I could do that, or I'm capable of doing that. It is a posture of humility that desires a grace intervention in our lives. It is a posture of humility that just says, God, I need you so much to meet me because I'm a mess. And meet me so we can meet with your people this week. So I can show this in tender, gracious ways where we're capable of this and perhaps much worse. Now, I want to suggest to you that this process is time-consuming. That if I'm going to try to travel to the world of Philippi or the world of Ephesus or the world of Ahab and ask the question, what's going on there? And if I'm going to not just look at the words on the surface, but do emotional archaeology, emotional analysis, and say, what's it like to be them? And if I'm willing to go, where do we do that? So why is it so vital that I preach this weekend and that people hear this and that I hear it for my own soul first and then theirs? I just want to suggest that this is time-consuming. There's any number of ways that you may schedule your life around doing this. But if you teach with any regularity, I would suggest that you identify pockets of study time that you attempt not to interrupt with other urgent things. The way my week is constructed, and again, I just do this to describe what I do, not to prescribe for you. It might work any number of ways for you, is that Monday, I don't generally do study. I do light lifting, catch up on email, work on personal projects, etc. Tuesday, my day is divided. I study in the morning and have appointments and answer email in the afternoon. Board meetings are often on Tuesday evenings. Wednesday, my time is divided where I study in the morning, have meetings, appointments, and answer email in the afternoon. Thursday, my day is divided where I study in the morning and then answer email and have appointments and meetings and interactions in the afternoon. Friday is a glorious day of optimally awaking and saying there's nothing I have to do, there's no place I have to go. My wife gets me, it's the one day where I'm not trying to fix the world. Saturday, because we have a Saturday evening service that I mic up for shortly after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Saturday is for study as well, but it's not like commentary study. At that point, does this introduction really work? Does this conclusion work? Where is the tension? Why did I think this mattered to me? And right now I'm trying to figure out why it should interest anybody. A little bit of panic involved. So I just want to write, that's an S, study there, study there, study there, study there. And I attempt as much as possible not to violate those study times. On a great day, I'm able to get in a run or a walk between so that I get outside, experience the air, run Monday morning early, Wednesday morning with a couple other dudes. So if I can get out Tuesday and if I can get out Thursday as this buffer between study and appointments, then that's awesome day. That happens maybe half the time. Sunday services here, services here, services here, and I have learned to get very intentional about Sunday afternoon and evening because I'm so drained that I can tell myself that what I deserve is to channel surf for hours while laying on the couch. And if I can't find one good program, then I'll toggle back and forth between 5 or 6 mediocre programs. And I deserve this because I've been working hard. I had to come to a point where I said, I'm empty, I'm vacuous. I could eat a large pizza and still not feel full. And it doesn't have to do with physical hunger, it's emotional hunger and being psychologically trashed after 3 communications and pouring my heart out. Back to over 100 years ago, Charles Spurgeon, when he wrote lectures to my students, has a chapter called The Minister's Fainting Fits, which is basically on pastoral depression after pouring yourself out and just feeling empty. The image he used is, do we not feel like clay jars that a kid could smash? We don't feel strong, we just feel weak. And so I've got into this drill lately with Chris where we go, okay, it's like I go from really, really high, and then you can actually just drop. I go from wired to exhausted, like somewhere between 12:30 and 2. And so it's like we get something to eat, and then I nap. And when I nap, as soon as I'm up, we're out of the house and we're outside. And we decide, okay, on that between 2 and 3, okay, what then? A trail walk, drive downtown and see the kids, but we get out of here because I could be a slug for the rest of the day. And I've learned in this space right here, which has nothing to do with preaching, but recovering, and this is Monday. God created Monday so that ministers who don't drink will know what a hangover is like. that I have to decide in advance what I'm going to do, because when I'm really tired and emotional depleted, I can fill my life with non-restorative time wasters, like channel surfing. By the way, we disconnected cable 2 years ago because the remote was there. And now I at least have to do the intentionality of going on Netflix, ordering something up and watching it. But we just don't even have cable anymore because of my ability to channel surf. And so non-restorative time wasters is you're filling your time with something, but it's not really filling you back up or restoring you. And so again, my theory is that if we become experts at pouring ourselves out, we better become experts at filling ourselves back up. And we better, I think that internet use, pornography, online shopping, mindless video games, channel surfing, I mean, there's all kinds of non-restorative to dark stuff that goes in there just because we're empty and we're trying to fill ourselves up with something. So I think that can be critical space.
Football's non-restorative?
I'm saying that watching a college game when it's the third game that day of teams we have no interest in might be non-restorative. I'm saying surfing ESPN and landing on women's JV junior college volleyball might be a non-restorative time waster. So anyway, Aaron, can I use your cell phone? The enemy of uninterrupted study time. The enemy of uninterrupted study time is interrupted study time. And so step number one is to take your cell phone and to put it in an envelope. And step number two is to take that envelope and put it in another envelope. Step number three is to take that envelope and put it in another envelope. If your cell phone beeps, buzzes, or pings every time you have an incoming text, or every time someone that you friend posts something on Facebook or on Instagram, then your study time isn't study time if that phone is beside you. And you're trying to go back and forth between Ezekiel phone, Ezekiel phone, Ezekiel phone, Ezekiel phone. And the depth of work you're trying to do might be so taxing on your brain that your brain will be looking for an excuse to do anything else. It used to be back in the day that if you really had a good hookup, you would have the pastor's office study, and outside the pastor's study would be the secretary that was the armed guard to prevent people from coming in, and would only send a phone into your office if it was critical and a true emergency. What we have done is we have taken everybody out there and pulled them into the office study with us. I mean, you've got to read Deep Work by Cal Newport. Deep Work by Cal Newport. He's got all of these sociological studies that basically say if you actually get deep into the zone and you're like hyper-focused on it, that if you get interrupted by anything, it can be like 15 to 20 minutes to get back into the zone, which can mean that if you have 3 or 4 interruptions in an hour, you're never in the zone. And so I believe that the enemy of uninterrupted study time is interrupted study time, and the chief interrupters are us. And I joke only half about putting it in an envelope, putting it in another envelope, putting it in another envelope. There is what we say, well, my wife is expecting, and she can go into labor at any time. There is a way to set your phone so that it will only ring if a certain group calls you. Put your spouse and the chairman of your board in that group, or an associate pastor that knows that he'll have to start the conversation with 3 disclaimers and apologies before bothering you, and then your phone only rings if it's them. But my humble opinion on this is that there is a whole generation that is moving up right now into the professional ranks that has never learned to focus. And Cal Newport, in his book Deep Work, says it's possible that they will never learn to focus. In fact, he says, don't even try to go deep work for 90 minutes. It's like pull-ups. Start with 30 minutes. Do that like about 10 days. Okay, now try to expand it to 35. Now try to expand it to 45. He says our ability to focus deeply on something without constant distraction, he says it's getting just like, and he's a millennial. And Cal Newport's a millennial. Anyway, have I ranted enough about that one? I guess all I'm saying is that these sermons just don't happen. Going back and saying what was really going on there and then pulling the story forward and illustrating it well. And you start with a plastic tub in one outfit and you end with a wooden box in one outfit. That's grunt work. It's intensive. It takes time and it takes focus. And constant interruptions will kill you on the way to there. So at this time, I'd rather not monologue anymore. I'd rather do two things. Newt, we can do Q&A. Aaron, if there's something like, oh, dude, you so missed the most important thing I could have talked about, because Aaron shadows me with stuff like this. So be interrupters or interrogators or wherever we want to go now.
Can you say something about the best resources? Are there any about? I mean, in the old days, there was Edersheim's Bible Times. Are there any commentaries that help pull that stuff out about them and us?
There is a tool that I turn to for geography, and it's the authors are Font and Reddish, and it's like biblical places in Greece and Turkey. And so if I'm spending a significant time in 2 Corinthians, I might take the time to read the 10 pages on Corinth and what Corinth was like and why Corinth was important. If I'm doing 1 Timothy, Ephesus, if I'm doing Paul's journeys. So I find that tool, someone can Google that right now and give me the exact name of it, Font and Reddish, F-A-N-T.
Yeah, your phone was biblical places in Greece and Turkey.
It is amazing. It is amazing how much background material you can receive from the most simplistic tools, meaning that one page before Philippians in an NIV study Bible. Something that shows a map of the city. Paul was here in Acts chapter 16. This is how the church, we believe that Paul is now imprisoned. It's amazing what you can find on that one page that gets you way down the track. And so it's not this obscure volume, you find this footnote. A lot of it is right there. We just use it in the introductory sermon and then lose it as we move through the series. As far as commentaries are concerned, I try to find what at the time, and it changes, happens to be the best commentary on. So I've got my buddies that are more scholastically rigorous than I am. Say, dude, I'm going through John. I don't know, D.A. Carson's John. If you still got Leon Morris on John sitting around, probably pull out Leon Morris, but D.A. Carson, I like that one better. So, but no one is great at writing every book of the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament. And so there are series that are strong in one book and not necessarily strong in another book. So I'm not necessarily sold on series. So I try to find that one volume, which seems to be the volume, which can take me deep enough, but where I'm not going to read 170 pages on the prodigal son. I just don't have the time, and I don't read that fast. So what's going to get me there fast and explaining the culture? So I try to find, I believe that 2 good commentaries are better than 8 mediocre commentaries. And I might be going out on thin ice here. I believe that 2 good commentaries are better than 8 good commentaries. Because after a while, I just thought, do I kind of understand where this is going? Yes. Okay. My week's evaporating. I can't 2 more views on this verse, and all of a sudden I'm lost, and there's this other argument. And so I'm going who can take me to what was this author looking for? And so I try to find two good resources on that. I may add that if you have the ability to travel to Turkey someday with a decent guide, and if you have the ability to travel to Israel someday with a decent guide, my reactions to the countries have been radically different. In Israel, I'm shocked at how close everything is. It's like everything's like right around the corner from top to bottom. Turkey, you drive and you drive and you drive and you drive and you go, I can't believe Paul and Silas walked this. I can't believe Paul and Barnabas walked this. A year and a half ago, I hiked for 5 days, one segment of Paul's first missionary journey through mountain ranges. And then all of a sudden you read 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians 11, Paul's sufferings, in danger from rivers, in danger from bandits, cold and hungry, often gone without sleep. And all of a sudden you go, man, you get caught in a rainstorm up here and you walk into the next town hypothermic. Bandits are there. They take your clothes because clothes were valuable. And you walk into the next town in your underwear. I mean, Paul says just his sufferings that took place, and all of a sudden on a hike like that. So I've had the privilege of being there in Turkey much more than Israel, number of, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 times. And every time learn something more. But it's just get to know the terrain. And if you can walk through Ephesus, if you can walk through Perga, if you can walk through Pisidian Antioch, if you can visit Corinth, if you can visit Athens, go north to Thessalonica, in Greece now. I've had the privilege of being in Greece a couple times. Doing it once, if you've never done it, doing it once could just be so valuable. Standing on the shore of the Sea of Galilee and saying, this is where Capernaum was, and that's where this synagogue was, and my goodness, Jesus might have taught right there. It's not mandatory, but it can be enlivening and it can be enriching. You just don't bore people with too many details when you get back. A question with background that I try to ask is this. Here's Philippi. Philippi was founded by Alexander the Great's dad, Philip of Macedon. Do people need to know that to understand the story? 4 miles away is the plains of Philippi, where Mark Antony and Augustus beat Brutus and Cassius after the assassination of Julius Caesar. Did they need to know that happened on the plains of Philippi, 100 years before, 80, 70 years before, whatever it was? And so a question, because I love that world, a question I try to ask is this. Does this help advance the narrative, or does it help define the character? Does it help develop the character, or does it advance the storyline? And those aren't original with me. Those are from Stephen King. Stephen King, in trying to decide what bits fit into his book and what bits don't fit into his book, he asked, Carrie and Tommy Knockers and his thriller chiller book, he asked the question, does it develop the character, or does it advance the storyline? If it doesn't develop the character and it doesn't advance the storyline, out she goes. I have a friend, Brad Gray, who actually treats it like a person. He says, I'm sorry, you have to leave now, you're not helping. To take a part of his sermon and go, I'm sorry, you're not helping, you have to leave now. And so in all of the background, what's it important to know about Ephesus and the contentment passage? That you could buy stuff there, that you could buy a lot of stuff there, that people shopped there, that Timothy was pastoring there, that it was like a Hong Kong or a New York City. That's enough. I don't have to give you the history of Ephesus. I don't have to show you the trade routes. One picture, one map, and then a bit on the Agora. Okay, we're there. And so it's how do you go enough, but not so much stuff that it's not telling me more about Paul, and it's not helping me understand Philippians 4. So I'm sorry, you have to go, you're not helping. So, good.
If you're preaching, let's say, through a book, how do you do the same thing in a passage? You can't say everything there is to say about this chapter. How do you decide what am I going to focus on and what am I going to say? It's nice, it's interesting, it's good information, but it's the Bible!
Yeah.
So how do you make those same choices in a text?
Yeah.
Grammatically, there is benefit in the epistles to attempt to separate the main verbs from the subordinating thoughts. And that's just a technical way of saying that often the key message is in the main, and then you trail off into prepositional phrases and whatever. So I don't want to get hyper-technical here, but in Ephesians chapter 1, we looked at one verse on adoption. There's like one main verb, it's like praise be to God, and there's like 3 participles. Those 3 participles revolve around having been adopted, he redeemed us, and having been sealed. And so there's this kind of like, and then it goes on and on and on. And so I took Ephesians, 1, 4 through 12, and focused on adoption, redemption, and sealing, without me personally feeling like I had to deal with every prepositional phrase that was there. but I wanted our people to see. Now remember, when this was presented to I believe Ephesians is a cyclical letter, there's not the hello and goodbye section you have in Romans and in Colossians. In Colossians, there is like 11 people that are mentioned at the end of Colossians. 20, I think, in Romans. And so in Ephesians, nothing. Tychicus will tell you all the news about me. He's coming with Onesimus. John Mark sends his greeting, the cousin of Barnabas. Jesus, who is called Justus. Say hi to Nympha, the church that meets in her house. That's at the end of Colossians. End of Ephesians, like nothing. And so I think it traveled, maybe even the route that the 7 churches of Revelation traveled through that region. I have no idea what I'm saying here. But when it arrived at a church, it was read. They read it, maybe in a setting. I don't think the person reading it stopped at every clause and described every prepositional phrase and every clause. It's kind of like, do you see where this is going and what Paul's communicating to us? And it was understood as it was read, without someone parsing the participles for an audience that was listening to the letter. And so my question is, how can I go through that as if people could understand it and say, this is where Paul is headed, before he tells them to do anything, before he tells them to behave, he just wants them to know that they belong. He adopted you, he redeemed you, he sealed you. And have people repeat with me out loud, he adopted me, he bought me, I'm his. He adopted me, he bought me, I'm his. That's your identity. Preaching, now again, other people would say, no, you take 3 years to get to Ephesians, and you haven't done it justice unless you deal with every clause and every prepositional phrase. I attempt not to preach a series that is longer than I can sustain my own attention. That is, if I'm bored with it way before they are, we're going to have a problem. And so I preached through Ephesians all fall and just preached Ephesians 1 through 4. So we'll come back to 5 and 6 later, but I don't think I have a threshold to spend a year and a half on Ephesians. And some people do, and some people love it, and it's, it works for them. Even in the, interesting though, I find it interesting, the passage that we looked at from Mark chapter 1, where it was like, what was the day and what day? I forget. A day of action, a morning of solitude, and a season of clarity. The version of preaching that I sat under growing up, and it was my father, you read a verse, you explain a verse. 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 A tactic that I use is frequently going, I tell it before I read it. They wake up the next morning. He's gone. He's not in his bed. He's not outside. They have no idea where he is. He's gone. And then I might read, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, went to a solitary place where he prayed. And so it's almost tell, read instead of read, tell. Also, the demoniac part, I didn't read that, I just told that. This guy stands up and he starts yelling, we know who you are, Jesus of Nazareth. If you come to destroy us, we know you're the Holy One of God. And Jesus says to him, be quiet and come out of him. And the guy shakes convulsively and there's a shriek. I told that without reading it, because just looking at the passage, trying to get through the synagogue service, the demoniac, Peter's house, people coming to the door, going off to pray, the disciples looking for him, it's just verse. I felt that I could do some summarizing there. And so a lot of times I deal with sections in a longer text through summary, rather than through read, explain. And somehow I get bogged down and lost somewhere in there. Anyway, I hope there's something in there that's helpful.
Another question?
Yes. One over here first.
The tension, you've said just a lot of things I think will help create the tension, but just like, what are some clarifying things about how you bring tension into a sermon?
That is a phenomenal question. In the introduction, I do not leave application for the introduction. That is, I do not preach for half an hour, 40 minutes, and then go, now, there are 3 ways that this applies. Early in the message, after giving the basic biblical background, I want to say, and we're going to have an important conversation today. Because the conversation we're going to have today is going to allow you're probably doing way too much and still feeling like you're not doing enough. The conversation today might give you the ability to give a confident yes and a liberating no. to all of the options that are. Today's an important conversation. You might be able to look at an option after we're done talking today and be able to say yes to things and be able to say no to other things with great freedom. It's going to be a good day. So I don't wait. Sometimes at the end of the sermon, let me tell you how this applies. This will help you. I go 30 minutes too late. And so somewhere up in preaching on John Mark and the falling out John Mark has with Paul, and how later, the end of Colossians, Paul says, Mark sends his greeting. If he comes to you, welcome him. It's kind of like, dude, you wouldn't travel with him on the second missionary journey. How does someone go from, I'll never work with him again, to writing the dude a letter of reconciliation? Well, about 14 years and healing, you know. But in getting into that message, very early, I said, listen, what was my introduction?
It was the rock band.
It talked about, anyway, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. They got their 40th anniversary tour this summer. And so Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and I thought, oh, yeah, but the bass player, he bailed in, and the drummer, he bailed in. See, study a band, it's a case study in how people get together, how they fracture, and how they break up. And today we're going to talk about how people get together and why, and how they fracture, and how they break up. It has to do with a guy by the name of Paul, a guy by the name of Mark, and I just need you to know things are going to get very complicated right away. But the application part of that was, listen, this is why this is important today. I'm guessing that some people central to your life 10 years ago were no longer central to your life. There's somebody, and I don't mean just because they moved away. I mean because there's a misunderstanding, some kind of a falling. I bet you there was someone in your life 10 years ago that just isn't today. Hate to break the news, but I would suspect that someone right now is central and core to your life, and there's a possibility 10 years from now they might not be, because fractures happen. Today we're going to have an open and honest conversation about how things are, but also about how the way they could be. And everybody in that moment, 7 minutes into the sermon, knows that this has to do with broken relationships and reconciliation. So part of tension is I want to let you know fairly early. So if there's that 1 Timothy, godliness with contentment is great gain, or nothing in this world, take nothing out of it. Friends, listen, I would use that Graham Hill, the house we live in, the $22 billion a year storage unit. I would say, listen, dude, this is, friends, today we're going to have a conversation about what we have, what we want, what we need, and what we think we need. But today is going to push you because it has to do with something very near to our hearts. Listen, if you shop when you're lonely or bored, today is going to mess with you. So let's just dive in. Let's talk about what's here, and let's ask our gracious God to meet us. That might happen in minute 7. So just want you to know where this is going. That happens early. Second answer to the question, though, is I use transitions as an opportunity to reschedule tension. A transition if I'm talking about this, then I'm talking about this, then I'm talking about this, 3 points. The transition is what do I do between points 1 and 2, and what do I do between points 2 and 3? If point 1 builds tension and resolves tension, how do I rekindle tension? And so in that Mark 1 sermon from this morning, being able to go, it's a day of action. He's healing people late at night. Next morning, he's gone. And I want everybody to go, where did he go? He's gone. He's not in his bed. He's not in the courtyard. He's not outside. The star attraction is gone. And people are beginning, what I'm trying to do in that moment is turn that back into an 88-90 game. All right? But I did that with a where is he? Rather than simply going, we've seen a day of activity. Now let's go to a morning of solitude. Jesus goes off to pray. Going, okay? So the where is he kind of builds the, and I did another, and so that was just a question. This one was a reverse as in football, where the tailback gets the ball and he's running to one side, and the defense is following him, and he hands it off to the end, who starts carrying. A reverse is in you get the action moving in one direction to get going in the other direction. And this is where Peter comes to Jesus and says, oh, everybody's looking for you. And Jesus goes, well, okay, let's go back to town. I just needed my quiet time. No. That's not what he does. Jesus looks at Peter and goes, we're not going back. We're not going back now. What we're about to read can make Jesus look highly insensitive. But I need you to follow. All of a sudden, it's an 88-90 game again. And so that was with a reverse, something we're expecting him to do. Joseph, he does the two dreams for the cupbearer and the baker. And it was the baker that kind of goes, yeah, unfortunately, 3 days from now, you're going to die. And the cupbearer, 3 days from now, you're going to get your position back. Joseph now knows the guy who knows the guy that can get him out of here. And Joseph goes, when you're with Pharaoh, you tell him, I don't belong down here. I'm supposed to be out of here. Dude, pack your bags. You're out. You're finally out. Look at the next verse. But the cupbearer forgot Joseph. Just go, oh. You know, and again, that's a reverse. You get the movement moving in one direction. And so a third thing, I use a question, I use a reverse. Another one is an objection. An objection is, yeah, dude, that doesn't always work. Jesus says, if your brother sins against you, go to him. Just between the two of you, show him his fault. If he responds, you won back your brother. So when you're in a board meeting and you feel like it's a skeet shoot, and every time you throw up an idea, some guy blows it out of the water, or blows it out of the air, afterwards, grabbing him by the elbow and say, no, before you go I need to walk you to your car. Are you upset with me? Do we have unresolved conflict? Because everything I said, you were contrarian. Didn't matter what I said, you were on the other side. I goes, yeah, I just had an awful day at work, and I just think I was angry, and I just took it out on you. I'm sorry. Are you? Yeah, okay, please don't do that again. I forgive you. Please don't do that again. Because I felt like it unraveled the whole board meeting. Jesus said, you just won back your brother. Yeah, dude. But sometimes that doesn't work. Here's the transition between the two. Sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes you talk to someone and say, that's not my problem, that's your problem. If you think I said that, and Jesus says, yeah, sometimes that happens. Sometimes you need to take along someone else to help mediate. That's what he says next. If he doesn't respond, take a brother with you. He says, yes, sometimes you need to have a mediator. Sometimes you need to have someone else bear witness and speak into the life of that person. Jesus acknowledged sometimes that doesn't work. Yeah. But when you take somebody else, sometimes, Jesus says, yeah, sometimes that happens too. This is a person that does not want to be part of community. You treat him like a tax collector. A tax collector is someone who says, the community is here, I defy the community, I am outside the community, I don't care if it hurts the community. Now, Jesus befriended tax collectors. He loved tax collectors, but he understood that they had placed themselves outside and they didn't care who they were going to hurt. Jesus says, you got to kind of treat the person like that. So, but I could say, stage 1 in reconciliation, now that we looked at stage 1, stage 2 in reconciliation, now that we looked at stage 2, stage 3 in reconciliation, but someone, dude, that doesn't work. That's an objection. And so I attempt, and I never get all this right. You know what I'm saying? In the perfect sermon, with my cell phone away, and the perfect study time, but I really think through, once I'm done talking about that, and now I'm talking about this, how do I get from here to there in a way that rekindles tension, in a way where something is at stake? In the Zechariah sermon, there was tension in point 1 over the pregnancy and no pregnancy. Dude, I'm sorry, I got to go. Zechariah's off now in Jerusalem doing his thing. And suddenly, by the way, when he's in praying, guess what the people outside are praying for? They're praying for this Roman thing to be gone. And they feel forgotten. They are a third-rate colony of a superpower. And his problem with no baby is their problem with no rescuer. They're waiting for the next Moses. This time it's not the Egyptians, it's the Romans. And so they're to still create a new crisis, or to reveal the crisis that's there. And then the angel comes and says, you're going to give birth to a son. He goes, what? I'm going to have a what? Well, guess what? You're going to talk for about 9 months. You know? And so there's a new tension there. And so I think that transitions, here we go, one sentence. Transitions are the art of recapturing tension. Transitions are the art of recapturing tension. And it's not simply that tension is maintained. I think it's maintained and it's resolved, and then it needs to be rekindled. It's almost like a game that turns into a blowout that needs to come back into a short game. Most 2-hour movies are built on multiple tensions. Just pick one 25, 30 years old. The Fugitive, Harrison Ford, Tommy Lee Jones. The bus crashes into the train tracks. The train is coming. He just gets out of the bus. before the train smacks the bus. Tension is built, tension is resolved. Tommy Lee Jones, helicopter, chasing him down in the tunnel. I'm at the edge of the tunnel. I didn't kill my wife. I don't care. He jumps off into the water. He swims to shore. Tension is built, tension is resolved. He's in the hospital. He's working. The nurse sees him. She pulls his name tag. He gets out before security comes. Tension is built, tension is resolved. He's in the jail looking for the one-armed man. Tommy Lee Jones sees him. They do the race down the staircase, runs outside into the St. Patrick's Day parade. Tommy Lee Jones shoots at him, but the bullets are stopped by the bulletproof glass. He disappears into the parade. Tension is built, tension is resolved. So a movie with a singular plot theme, I want to find out who kills my wife and brings him to justice, is built on multiple tensions throughout the movie. I mean, I use A Fugitive as an example. Try Apollo 13. Now they're out of oxygen. Now they've got to reboot everything without blowing the fuses. Now will it actually be a parachute or will it be a block of ice? And I find myself sitting there hanging onto the bottom of my chair during the radio silence. Like, dude, chill. It's historic. They made it back. You know, so how can they make me forget that I know when I know how the story goes? And I think that's the art of telling old stories from the Bible that people know. Make me forget that I know that when Jesus looks into the tree and sees Zacchaeus, he doesn't go, how dare you? Jesus says, I want to have dinner at your house. Zacchaeus goes, he sees me, he knows me, he wants me. He can have me. The people go, can you believe he went to his place? And Jesus says, this is what the whole deal is about. The Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Luke chapter 19. I believe that's a summary statement, not of the Zacchaeus story, but everything that has come before. I came here for lost people, to look for them, to find them, to bring them home. It's the story of the prodigal son. Luke chapter 15. It's the story of the Pharisee and the tax collector, which is somewhere after the prodigal son or right before, and it's the story of Zacchaeus. It's the same story over and over and over. Lost people coming home. I don't know what question I'm answering, but that's a great place to stop.
Can you do them and us on John 3:16? How do you do it on something that's so beautiful by itself and
Yeah, well, of course, the challenge in John 3 is figuring out what's still the conversation with Nicodemus and where John starts monologuing. So where does the Nicodemus conversation end and where does Jesus begin? But the them is and the contrast between John 3 and John chapter 4, John chapter 4, a woman at the well, here's a woman who's burned through multiple marriages, a rule breaker, outcast, and here's a rule keeper. And both the rule breaker and the rule keeper need grace. And so the them, even in John chapter 3, might be religious man, rule keeper, comes to Jesus at night. Jesus says, you got to understand this whole thing's of grace.
You're always going to go to the context.
Try to. God loved the world, and he's talking to a Pharisee and just says, God so loved the world that he sent his son, that whoever believes, but he's telling a religious guy that he needs grace, which is tough for us. Yeah.
The mechanics of your notes at the pulpit?
I have preached without notes for 20 plus years, and I'm a bad reader. I learned to read really late. I probably went to college reading at a fourth grade reading level. My greatest fear in high school was being called on to read publicly, like being in youth group and say, yeah, you read Romans chapter. It was just paralyzing because of the way I would stammer through a verse. And so I have friends that preach with notes, and it's seamless, and you barely know that they're there. I memorize the sermon thought per thought, and some parts are wordsmithed and practiced. Others are thought for thought. But I preach 40 plus minutes with no notes.
You practice out loud?
I practice pieces of it out loud. I would probably benefit from this, doing the entire sermon out loud from beginning to end. I don't do that. But I practice bits out loud so that they feel right and so that cradle to grave bit, I would have done that in my car out loud, thinking through that and figuring out how that flows. Yeah, what do you do when you don't? So what do you do when you don't get what you want? I'll practice just the way that sounds. Is that what I need to say there? And then also the grid, the board meeting, come home, let's go on vacation next week. Wife says, oh no, I agreed to help her with her garage sale. And your daughter says, that's stupid if I can't bring my friends. So what do you do when you're planning some getaway and no one wants to cooperate? What do you do when you don't get what you want? And so I will think through the grid there and the different elements so that I can make that situation real without turning it into a short story. So, Mr. Larson.
2 more questions, at least?
Please.
Or if they have any. Kip has one right now.
Hey, when you figured out the them part,
Yeah.
you got this idea and you want to bring it back to us. So you want to give several concrete, real situations. Do you ever run into a wall there, a mind block, and do you have processes for helping you to figure out what are concrete examples that show what it looks like in real life now?
What I used to do, and now it's a little more organic, is I would think through middle school, college, 40s, 70s, and then you got 70 and healthy, and you got 70 and widowed, and you got 70 and still running a business, and you got 70 retirement. So just because it's 70, it doesn't mean middle school, parents just divorced, middle school, grandpa just got cancer, middle school. And so I would, almost like graph paper, I would think through a grid so that if I said, okay, Naomi, and here's one of the challenges, take the Naomi experience and the family portrait, and boiling that down to empty. Let's just say I said, you just felt empty. Have you ever felt emptied? You're absolutely emptied. It's a 7th grader that says, yeah, that's me. Last year, I had 4 good friends. One moved to Minneapolis, one changed schools, and one won't talk to me anymore. I just feel emptied. It's the widow that says, my husband, when my husband died, he was really our social calendar. We had all these couples we hung out with. I've been with them. It just doesn't feel the same. I just feel like I've been emptied. It's the, family that experienced foreclosure on a home. And you say, dude, it was 6 years ago. That wasn't just a house. We taught our kids to ride their bikes in that driveway. We opened Christmas presents. I don't even feel like we've been a family since we lost our home. Yeah, Jeff, that's us, man. We feel emptied out. Maybe not like Naomi, but we feel emptied out. And so I try to kind of figure out and with this middle schooler, it might be something relatively trivial in relationship to someone in their 50s, but very real to them. So yeah, I feel empty. I feel like I don't have a friend in the world. So that's a mechanic that I used to go through. I just try to now think through my relationships. I try to have some young friends and some older friends, and then my parents and then my siblings. And in my world, there's enough drama to be able to go, oh my goodness, that's like Karen. I buried her husband last year after a 2-year battle with cancer, and then disguise it enough so she goes, oh, it feels like so much like me. That guy you talked about, yeah, that was you. Try to disguise it enough so they wouldn't find themselves in it. If it's a friend of mine whose daughter is dealing with alcohol again, I might do a friend across the country whose son is back into drug use. So I just try to disguise it enough in gender or geography so it originates, and it's like a composite of different people I've run in over the years. And a lot of those grids are not telling people what to do. They're just describing life. It's like Naomi being emptied. It's like Zachariah and Elizabeth childless. I'm not telling you to do anything right now. I'm saying it can be like this, where you're trying really hard and God is not giving you what you've been asking. You've been praying for 2 years. Why is it that their house sold in 3 days and yours has now been on the market for 18 months and you want a landscape around it? Why them and not you? Are they living better lives? So. Very good?
When I'm done with one of your talks, I feel like you understand life and you aren't preaching at me.
Huh.
That's obviously deliberate.
Hmm.
I don't want to ask if you grew up with that because your dad was your preacher, but
Hmm.
when you're thinking things through, you're really out there with them, aren't you?
Yeah. I get weepy in my sermons. It embarrasses me. Particularly 3 services.
I'm trashed afterward. And I try to figure out why I get weepy. And one of the reasons I get weepy is I start to fall in love with the characters. I care for Zechariah and Elizabeth. I know that sounds sappy, but in a good movie, that's what happens. You identify with them in a way that it moves you. I identify with Naboth, you know, who gets his kids killed because he tries to hang on to his property. And then I get weepy too for the struggle, the human struggle, and just challenging people to struggle better and to struggle with hope rather than with despair. Despair is the condition of having no hope, and it's awful space. And so one thing my dad did, my dad loved ministry. Small church pastor, southern Idaho, Mormon communities. So he'd go into a town with 9, 10 Mormon churches, little Catholic church, little, I don't know, maybe a Lutheran church or something like that, and my dad would go in and start a Bible church. So they were small, and he loved people, and they loved him. He shielded us from the darker edges of ministry. He never talked with my mom in our hearing about who was saying what or doing what. So we experienced ministry. I grew up under the delusion, that you couldn't do anything funner with your life than to go into ministry. Just watch it. So that's the gift my dad gave me. Another gift he gave me is that competence is overrated. So what if you've never done a wedding? Get in there and figure it out and do it. So what if this is your first communion? So this is how he taught you to swim. No, he's the guy you're looking over the dock and he puts his, foot on your butt and kicks you in. I interned under my dad, meaning that I went after freshman in high school, went to his church in Northern California, and he said, oh, by the way, you'll be directing Vacation Bible School in a month. If I were you, I'd get started. That was how he led me to do Vacation Bible School. If I might have a suggestion on who some of your grade school leaders might be, ask me if you want. Yeah, give me a list and phone numbers. And so, competence is overrated. Get in, learn it as you go along. And that was a gift I got from my dad. So, all right. Hey, I don't know what you're going to do right now, but I need to do something like a bishop would do or something. So I don't know what you carried in here today. I don't know whether it's weariness, deep anxiety when we talked about getting the fire burning, and, stir up the coals, get the fire lit. I just ask that God would meet you and he would use your life. That if you've hit a low point, that he would provide the friends and the resources that you need for a lift. That if you need to make a vocational change of some sort downstream, that he would walk you through that carefully and not as a reaction to immediate hardship you're experiencing, and just that God would meet you. We have the most phenomenal calling in the world, that of opening the scriptures, going back to the story of God's people, and shepherding people through it. It is a skill worth developing, and it is a skill worth devoting our lives to. I don't know what level of gift you have, but do everything you can to shepherd your gift to the maximum ability that you can shepherd that gift. So I ask right here and now that God would give you wisdom, that he would give you strength, that he would give you perseverance for the journey, that we know how deeply you are loved by the Father, and that you would remember that it is his flock that you have the privilege of shepherding.